Almost time for Halloween. Don't come to my house or else I'll suck your dick blood. I'll suck your blood. Ah, shit.
So today we're going to go and talk about the ins and outs of vampires in story writing in general and how to apply it to your own writing. Between the two different types of vampires we usually get, one's from a curse and one's from the disease, the vampire disease. People only do the non-curse one because they hate Jesus, honestly, and they don't like the idea that the sun is a holy symbol of our Lord and Savior.
Sometimes people need a diseased variant of vampirism to remind them just enough of real life to form catharsis within themselves, which is where we see many of the themes of vampirism come into play. That's us.
The original concept of vampires started with the curse, and we have a story coming out right now, Nosferatu, which I think is in theaters right now, and that's, I'm assuming, going based off of the curse. And I feel like, past, 10, well, not 10 years ago. In the past, it's become more popular in the more recent times that they've gone more to the scientific route that it's a curse. And we always talk about how stories need to be rooted into some realism, and I feel like they've gone away from the curse stuff to kind of bring it to a disease to root it more into realism. Now, rooting it into that more realism, does that then make it a better story? Is it kind of annoying? Some people just kind of can't stand the fact that we don't have the vampires being told how that they think it should by it being a curse. And some people, that's the only way that they want vampires being written. It's something else if it's a disease, which I wouldn't say they're too wrong on that.
The very idea of comparing it between a disease and a curse, because a disease can be a curse, but when we say curse, we mean like a magical curse, right? Which can kind of tie into like a hard and soft magic system if you wanted it to, because after all, like even basically the fantastical elements of your story are kind of like your magic system in a way.
Especially in the curse form, like they become essentially the embodiment of gluttony, this hunger for blood that they cannot control. So it becomes the character's fatal flaw, which is using the 7 deadly sins. I think people don't really think about gluttony when they think vampires because they're skinny. But yeah, using the seven deadly sins is a great way to attribute flaws to your characters. Usually your protagonist, right? But like again, that creates a great villain antagonist, which in this case for an antagonist, they can't overcome that flaw, and that's kind of what makes them evil in that sense.
When you look at a Nosferatu, right, you can just see the anguish on their face. Vampires in general, like you mentioned, very skinny, and they have to be because like that's part of the whole idea is they're so hungry all the time, yet starving no matter how much they feed, and they're cursed with immortality, so they see all their loved ones pass away. What I like about the diseased variant of a vampire is a lot of them tend to be, because the author has already gone into the realm of realism in the form of disease, as we can see with like zombie movies and stuff, which, side note, we can put a pin in this, vampires are kind of like super zombies, if you want to think of it that way. Like, it would be very in line for a vampire to command a horde of zombies. They're both undead creatures in that regard. But in that sense, it might make more sense if they were more on the cursed side of things. Now, unless you wanted to get into like spores and stuff like that, then maybe there's some sort of like communication going on there. But I digress. Since the author has already gone into the realm of realism with disease, the vampires tend to be kind of bestial. You can see them degrade into like a feral state, where you can come across a sort of like Nosferatu-esque vampire that's just like a shell. They're just a hungry beast, right? They're just gonna catch anything and drink the blood.
So why would somebody use a curse over the disease when I mentioned before how the disease is rooted into some realism? Well, maybe it's because it gets a little bit ridiculous. I always think this with zombies, especially in the past. People would always talk about with zombies. They're like, "Oh, that's the realistic monster that can come about." But it's like, nah, not when you think about the laws of energy. And so it's just like, there's no possible way in a disease variant that a vampire could be getting the energy to do anything that they're doing, especially with it like, and then like, how do you explain the strength and stuff like that? So almost rooting it into that realism is almost counterproductive and a little bit retarded. Like, how are they so much stronger and they have no more muscle mass? Actually, they kind of are skinnier than they were. So then it's like, yeah, go more to the magical realm and use that as your answer to explain why we have these vampires versus the disease. And I like when people kind of like that when they do try to bring a scientific element to it, because it brings a little bit more horror into it, because then the thought becomes, oh, this could happen to me, right? And that's when you're trying to create this element of dread and horror, like you kind of want the reader, the viewer, or whatever, to kind of like have this like, well, what if, right? And that's kind of what made zombies such a scary element into stories.
One of the funnest aspects of the whole zombie era, back when like The Walking Dead was at its absolute like meteoric ascension to the throne, basically, when everybody was thinking about it, it was really cool to just like imagine scenarios, like how would you survive? And part of that is because of like the realism that you said. And I wouldn't be so quick to knock zombies' bats, because we do have cordyceps that we see makes insects act like zombies, and the only thing that stops those from infecting us is our body temperature. So they're very good.
Yeah, think about the energy it takes to run an insect versus us.
You're right. You're right with that one. It would be horrifying. I think the amount of, like, we would have to have, like, a huge fruiting body on our back to just keep everything in line.
Okay, now we're going to get into the element of the discussion of solar energy and how inefficient of an energy that is. Yeah, it works really great for trees and plants that don't move. But then when you talk about people and stuff like that and the size of us, like, yeah, you kind of need something more than just solar.
Right. And the only thing I'll add to that is you can get zombies in real life, and this is relevant to the vampires here. They're just they have a very quick expiration date. Is the only thing.
True, but then it's like, how far can that spread? I mean, then now we're playing the game of pandemic or whatever it is.
You need
it's just not going to work, and that's kind of where I'm arguing. Of like, maybe reading it realism's retarded. You can. So I love how I'm like, you know, this whole thing breaks logic and it's retarded. You're like, I'll show you retarded.
Yeah, let's go retarded. Let's go full retard. Have you seen my background? Let's go full retard. Let's do it. No, it's not even retarded.
Everybody knows you never go full retard.
Let's go.
What's interesting is we do get this distinction almost in fantasy, taking the fantasy curse element of stuff, where it's like vampires are still always separated from demons, beings from hell, when the original vampire was very much like an embodiment of the devil, a demon of such, right? And that's why I mentioned the sun. The reason the sun burns the vampire is because it's a symbol of God. And that's why the vampires die when the sun's out. And not because of, you know, the UV light, which is brought into the disease element. But yeah, there's been that separation where vampires end up becoming their own thing. Maybe they have like a demon overlord or something like that, but it's always an interesting distinction that is kind of created when it comes to fantasy stories. And I think it's something that's just, the vampire and werewolves too, like, they become so iconic that we want this separate distinction between them and demons. And I like it. I'm going to do it in my story, probably. Like, if I have vampires, they're probably going to be different than the demons. I have demons, but they'll be separate, right?
They're almost always exclusively mortals that became vampires, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Well, that's always the case. It's like that they're cursed by a demon, cursed by a Satan or whatever. Unless you're talking about Dracula, who is like potentially the devil.
Yeah. Some of the lore I'm familiar with, like, for example, and I find this pretty fascinating, because in things like Magic the Gathering, and I think even D&D, I think Dungeons and Dragons also goes a little bit more, like, they go the magical side, right? And the Magic the Gathering, I believe that was one of the ways that these, because the whole thing revolves around planeswalkers, they travel the planes, cool, adventure time, whatever. One of the ways that these beings that are essentially uniquely powerful by being able to travel between worlds, like, obviously that's powerful. One of the ways that they decide, that they figure out how to stay alive, because that's actually one of the themes. When you become one of these people, you want to stay alive forever. Well, one of the ways they do it, hit up a demon, and the demon's like, yeah, I know immortality. Go do this thing for me. And then you go do the thing, and then they're like, okay, stand still. Boom, you're a vampire. You know what I mean? They have vampire origin stories on several different worlds in Magic the Gathering, and it's interesting because it's almost always like kind of that case where like a demon is like, yeah, I can show you how to be immortal. And that's seriously one of the main ways in Dungeons and Dragons too. Anybody who's played a wizard who has like long-term ambition, like you're not just a fighter that's gonna just like fight real good for your life or like live forever and fight real good. You're like somebody who wants to change the face of the plane, right? Those people eventually get reached with the point of like, how do I live forever?
It's interesting where the disease version of vampirism kind of started as a vampire, started as a subversion of the vampire take, and a lot of things that we discuss on this channel is how this overly subverting of genres and stories, character archetypes, and everything like that has gotten really tired and old. And there's been this calling from audience members and stuff. And this is what we talk about here, guys. Join us, subscribe, and watch us live and shit. But return to the old stories of days, because yeah, they're old, but if we're since there's been a lack of them, it's actually now going to be refreshing, and people want refreshing when they read their stories, when they watch their stories. So bringing back the cursed vampire is now going to be the refreshing version over the subverted cursed vampire.
That's that rubber band effect, right, Babs?
Absolutely.
You can go too far, snaps back.
Vampires can often be kind of allegory-ish for the super elite, right? Our who's the guy who didn't kill himself?
Yeah, that guy who didn't delete himself.
Yeah, the guy who didn't kill himself. Like, basically, like, hey, that's a vampire. It's a real world vampire.
They're all vampires.
Yeah. And I believe he's wearing a bodysuit. They wear bodysuits in order to be able to stand out in the sun.
Could be reptilians, too, for all we know. Reptilians could have vampiric properties, for all we know. The idea of an orc vampire, bro. So cool. You already got the tusks.
We don't have enough orc vampires.
No, not enough orc vampires. You already got the tusks, and you're telling me, like, you get the vampire fangs on top of it?
Well, they go to the excuse that it's like, oh, only human blood is capable of, like, carrying the disease without dying or whatever. It just kind of feels like a little boring when you only get the human variant of whatever it is, or if it be vampirism. But another aspect about vampires, and D&D covers this really pretty well, the fact that, like, you tend to become a slave, and it's a common way it is basically the vampire that turned you then controls you, and then also if they die, I've seen it like in the Iron Druid Chronicles. If they die, you also die, which is also like extra like shitty, because then it's like, well, now I got to make sure that guy lives so I don't die. So that adds like a super interesting element, creates a crazy type of like potential conflict, serious conflicts in your story, because it's like, well, what if you got a guy that in this world you can kind of control the vampirism, because like a lot of times they're like, oh yeah, just drink animal blood. It sucks, but it's something you could do. Your friend does that, but there's still the vampire that turned him is alive, and that's the evil bad guy. But now if you kill him, you're also killing your friend, and it's just like this creates a huge conflict in your character that creates a huge interest in the readers to see somebody struggle through a conflict.
The heart in conflict with itself is a famously great storytelling tool to lean on. George R.R. Martin does this all the time, to his detriment in some cases. But I think you touched on one of the most powerful aspects of vampirism as an idea and as a whole. I mentioned earlier the similarities between vampirism and lycanthropy, werewolves. Whereas like the werewolves are kind of like the beast within, I mentioned the vampirism vampirism's like the darkness within. So it's like the beast within is almost like your own nature. That's why there's all this bestial symbolism around werewolves. Now, when you look at vampirism as the darkness within, the shadow within, like to the point where you're even allergic to sunlight, right? It's very heavy symbolism there. And it's addiction. It's kind of the same thing as like your nature in a way, but it's like I said, it's a curse. It's a curse, right? So you're afflicted with this disease. This curse.
It's more human elements of things that you could succumb to, like you said, addiction. Like we don't have animals
lust.
that come to this addiction. Yeah, lust and stuff.
Lust is one of the strongest symbols with vampirism. Lust. That's why there's the lusty vampire lady. That's like a trope, right? You get the lusty, busty vampire lady. That's like seductive.
Which we need more of those.
Make her an orc. There you go. Double down. But what's Dracula? He's super
This is
charming.
the diversity we need.
Yes. And like more Khajiit. Khajiit blend in.
I'm not.
Khajiit
Nah,
knows
none of that furry shit.
Hey, they're like not okay. Well, I can't speak for like the furry community what they think, but I interpret them as like not the same energy, I guess.
Sorry,
they're like
it might have been okay at some point, but furries ruined it. And just check that as another thing the furries ruined.
That inner darkness, that inner craving, that addiction, that thing that you're afflicted with, that you crave. That's like the vampirism. That's drinking blood. That thing that you consume. You know, whether that's your corn addiction, your video game addiction, lady addiction, dude addiction, whatever it is, politics addiction, right? Some people have that. Whatever derangement syndrome you may have, that is your vampire.
If you're a slave to seed oil.
Slave, yeah, that was the other thing, man. That's a whole nother topic too. Like, yeah, you're a slave to it. That's the dead.
Yeah, how does the vampire correlate with the symbolism to canola oil and the seed that comes from there, which I can't say on YouTube?
Yes, or alcoholism, right? Could be like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Guys, if you made it this far, thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to these two retards on the Iron Seas. Please consider subscribing and joining us on our live shows that happen every 9:30 Eastern PM, where we have a great show. We talk about a lot of fun storytelling topics, and also if you go there, you can probably get an invite to our Discord. It's a blast. And also, make some comments. What do you guys think about vampires? Do you think they're gay? Are they always gay? Is there vampires that aren't gay? I don't know. And of course, like the video and check out some of our. The Iron Seas. We consist of a couple of captains. Me and AC are two of them, and we all have our own projects. And currently, right now, I have a book that is available on Amazon. Tale of the Dunce Whisperer. Link to that is in the comments. Check that out. And AC,
look forward to my book coming out, Promise of Starlight. I've been releasing a bunch of companion music to go along with it, because as I've been doing my final pass of editing, I'm realizing there's a lot of songs I wrote in there, and it's pretty cool to bring them to life. I'll be sharing them on the Pritchard Pub YouTube. You can go sub to that. Otherwise, find me on X, A_C_Pritchard. That's on X and all other platforms. TikTok,
and you'll get
everything.
all the updates on this channel as well, and we'll talk about that weekly as well. Again, appreciate you guys listening to these two disabled individuals. Join the Iron Seas, where we enjoy a good fight.